From Zylock to Sherlock, Anglophiles like a lot of things, but there's something they love above all else. That is correcting people. This is Actually. Joining us today, we have Emma Fife.
Hello, I'm happy to be representing the country of Scotland in today's episode.
We also have Amy Vorpal.
Hello. Hello.
Hello. And we have John Gutierrez.
Hello, everyone.
Hello. Well, I'm going to do my best to not do accents throughout this whole thing, because I'm sure that will be insulting, but I'm going to be very tempted to. Well, as I mentioned in the intro, this episode is about all kinds of British TV shows and movies, still mostly sci-fi, fantasy, geek stuff, and there might be a couple other things thrown in there, but stuff from across the pond, which, you know, like some of it makes it over here, some of it doesn't, and it does attract like a sub-niche subculture of people over here who are just like, yeah, I love it. There's a reason BritBox exists as a subscription service. We're not sponsored yet, but if you want to, I guess send me some money. Don't send it to the company, send it to me personally. Well, great. Well, we'll get right to our questions here. The dwarfs of Discworld are ruled by a high king, Rhys Rhysson. The title is something of a mistranslation. The dwarfish word translated as king actually means senior engineer of the mine, and it is an elected position with nothing in the title indicating an ordained right to rule. Goots has buzzed in.
I'm trying desperately to remember the last 4 Discworld novels, but actually, I don't think it's an elected position. I think it's appointed.
That is incorrect, at least as far as I know. Something may have changed in some later books, but I believe, as far as I know, it is an elected position.
Actually, we're not even talking about dwarves.
Just in general.
Yeah, there's not dwarves. We're talking about some buried, undead half-orcs.
That is incorrect. Emma.
Okay. Actually, it doesn't mean chief engineer of the mines. It means greatest engineer of the mines.
I love the slow, like, it's like, ow. It's really just like hacking away at weeds to get to an answer. It's like, is it this?
Yeah.
No, that's not correct. Goots.
Actually, the High King's name is no longer Rhys Rhysson because she came out as a woman in the last book. It turned, because all dwarves hide their sex. They're all kind of assumed to be men, but some of them are women. And in the last book, she comes out and reveals that she takes on a new name, which is not Rhys Rhysson.
Interesting. There's a lot of correct details about Discworld dwarves in that. I don't know if the name has changed, though. I think the name is the same, but Saltzman will check me on that. That's a no. It's a no. The answer we were looking for is that that is actually not the High King. It is the Low King, because dwarves in Discworld, everything is reversed. The lower you are, the better it is.
Okay.
So
Of course.
It's you just do the old switcheroo. You got to dig in that mines. But the conception of dwarves in the Discworld books, I think, are very fun, and the way it's used to like comment on things like gender and.
I love fantasy novels that when you read them, you're like, this is just a list of a brainstorming session that the writer had.
I mean, that is a lot of what Discworld is, but it's self-referential, so it works.
Yeah. I mean, the thing I love, like, what's great about comedies is like you can, like, it affords you so many shortcuts, because you can sort of be like, oh, I want to talk about this thing. I have this idea here. And even if you have something that's like, this is a little slapdash or this is a little stupid, it's a comedy, so you can always just like hang a little lampshade on it and be like, I know, shut up, go along with it for this little file.
Yes.
We'll move on to our next statement. In Charlie and the Great Glass Elevator, 3 of Charlie's bedridden grandparents are offered a rejuvenation formula called Wonkavite. They take more than the recommended dose, accidentally de-aging by 80 years and becoming babies. This process is later reversed by administering Vita-Wonk to age them up again. Goots is buzzed in.
Actually, that sentence should have had lazy in it. Those lazy grandparents that never do anything.
Get out of bed. Quit sending your child into the factory to make you rich and do something. No, that's not what we're looking for. Emma has buzzed in next.
Actually, it was not accidental. They like really hit this stuff hard, and they meant to.
Have you tried this? Holy shit, guys! Just pass it around again. Pass it. Quit hoarding it. Just like passing this thing around. No, that's not what we're looking for. Amy.
Okay.
Actually, the names of Vita Wonk and Wonkavite are y'all made those up.
No, that is that's not me. That's the genius of Mr. Willy Wonka himself. The answer we were looking for is that I said that it de-aged them by 80 years and they became babies. 2 of them became babies, but Grandma Georgina was only 78 years old. So when it de-aged her 80 years, she became -2 years old and sort of blinked out of existence. And Charlie and Willy Wonka have to travel to Minus Land to track down her spirit in order to save her from non-existence.
Okay.
All right.
Which, like, I love because it's like, it starts off feeling like a fun thing. It's like, oh yeah, it's like a Fountain of Youth thing. And then becomes this like deep existential like adventure of like, wait, what is a soul? How can you be negative years old? Wait, do we know what the afterlife is like?
This is when abject atheism becomes absolutely fun.
Yeah.
You can make up anything.
Just like thinking about coming back from that adventure, like it's like not like I guess everything that like Wonka does to anyone is like, what the fuck happened to me? But like you have to imagine Grandma Georgina came back from that and just like, no, the world is so like just like this sort of like weird Lovecraft horror kind of thing of just like the world is so much bigger and insane than we know, and it like just becomes like a gibbering idiot for the rest of time.
Have y'all read any of Roald Dahl's short stories?
Mm-hmm.
They're nightmares, and the one that I'm thinking of is the one where trees and flowers are sentient, and every time you pick one, it screams bloody murder. And it's like it sticks in my head. I must have read that when I was 10 or 11, and I was forever changed.
Is this like a magical world where this is, or this is like
no?
It's like the happening. Like one day, it's just like
one person experiences this, but you get the full emotion of that person, and they just walk around going, "Why is this happening? Why is this happening?" And it's a nightmare.
Yeah,
wow.
They made a whole TV series called Tales of the Unexpected, which are just adaptations of Roald Dahl short stories for the first 2 seasons, and that's a horrifying thing. And they actually show Roald Dahl in the beginning. He introduces them in a way that's far creepier than any Crypt Keeper, to know that a real person is talking about a real story he did, and then just handing off of him to a creepy story he's done.
I'll share this last little bit here too, which is that Charlie and the Great Glass Elevator ends with the President of the United States inviting Charlie, Willy Wonka, and the family for a meal at the White House.
I'm surprised he didn't just invite him to be the president.
Yeah.
You know, that's approximately how that works.
Charlie just is constantly like clawing. He's like failing upwards, you know, or just like he happens to be in the right place at the right time, or someone's like, I don't know, why don't you do this job now?
1,000%. Charlie didn't do anything. He just showed up, and Willy Wonka was like, you own everything now.
You, child, have fucked up the lease, and so you get to run a factory. Well, once again, no points for that one, but we will move on to our next question, which is about Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. In the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, Bogons are described as being one of the most unpleasant races in the galaxy. They are notable for destroying Earth in order to make way for a hyperspace express route, and for having the worst poetry in the galaxy. One particularly bad example of Vogon poetry is Ode to a Small Lump of Green Putty I Found in My Armpit One Midsummer Morning by Grunthos the Flatulent, which killed 4 audience members during a recitation.
Actually, the poem didn't kill them. The bodies of the people listening themselves killed themselves from hearing it.
That is, so your argument is that it was poems don't kill people. The self-destruction of the
I'm making the defense's argument for the manslaughter case.
No, that's not what we're looking for.
Actually, that Vorgon's name was not, Gronk the Flatulent. It was just Fart.
Incorrect. That is incorrect.
Okay, actually, the poetry is not terrible. Like, this is a little bit of a reverse psychology situation. That's actually a great example of Vogon poetry, because they want that effect of it just, causing people's bodies to rampantly self-destruct upon themselves.
It's probably true to say they do think their poetry is good. You raise an interesting question, I guess, about art, if we can say, like, is there objective badness? You're not right, but you're kind of circling around the right area.
Actually, the deaths were not accidental.
No, I don't think they intended to kill anyone with their poetry. I'm a little tempted to like get some points on the board and just give Emma something just because she was kind of close, but it's still early game, so I don't know if I'm quite ready to do that.
Okay. We can save it as a ghost point to award.
Ghost point.
Ghost point.
No one else gets a point this whole time.
It'll come back with the negative 2-year-old soul of Grandma Georgina.
So we'll call this one the answer I was looking for is I said that Vogons have the worst poetry in the galaxy, but actually they're introduced as having the 3rd worst poetry in the galaxy, or perhaps the 2nd, depending on what timeline you're in. But definitely not the worst. They're behind the Asgoths of Krea. And also behind Paula Nancy Millstone Jennings of Sussex. Those are the 2 people with worst poetry. Maybe the 2nd worst if we're after the time Earth was destroyed, then they would have bumped up in their rankings because presumably.
All right.
Well, I think what we do here is we let Vogons be Vogons.
I'm embarrassed I didn't remember that, but I do remember that Paula Nancy Millstone Jennings, the story behind that name is that it was a high school friend of Douglas Adams who he felt had the worst poem.
Oh,
so
really?
in the first edition of the Hitchhiker's Galaxy, it was just his name. It was like Paul Niels something Jennings. And after he threatened to sue, they had to change it just slightly enough to be a fictional name.
That is correct, and I will risk his ire by reading it now. It was the name of a very real poet, Paul Neil Milne Johnstone of Redbridge, Essex, which was a classmate of Adams at Brentwood School. And yeah, in the original radio show of Hitchhiker's Guide, they just used his name, and he was like, "Don't do that." So it became Paula Nancy Millstone Jennings of Sussex instead of Paul Neil Milne Johnstone of Redbridge.
Way to just like work your personal critique of a poet
It's rap
into your
wars.
novel.
This is just rap wars. They're just sit down, be humble, y'all.
Did you hear Douglas Adams release his new diss track? Goots, you had all the extra details I was going to talk about there, and this will bring us to our fan question. This is a fan question. Most of these questions are about more kind of sci-fi fantasy stuff. This one's about Downton Abbey. Because it came to us from a fan, and I felt that was worth including.
Amazing.
In the world of Downton Abbey, there are many marriages that happen throughout the series. Upstairs, eldest daughter Mary and middle child Edith are each married twice, and the youngest child Sybil is married once, though the wedding occurs off-screen. Downstairs, Mr. Bates and Anna marry after dealing with his wicked ex-wife, and Mrs. Hughes and Mr. Carson wed in Series 6. Coots is buzzed in.
Actually, there are no children on Downton Abbey because everyone is 55 in the entire world.
Everyone's old, but everyone's still a child of someone. They're all the adult, my grown adult daughters.
Actually, Edith is only married once.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Edith is only married once. She's left at the altar by Sir Anthony Strallan.
Yes.
Later, she plans to wed Michael Gregson once he can become a German citizen and divorce his first wife on the grounds of her being locked up due to her mental illness, but he dies before they can officially marry. She finally marries Bertie Pelham in Series 6 after overcoming his new title and the social stigma of her having a daughter fathered by Gregson weeks before his death.
Yeah, she had a rough time, Edith.
Yeah.
And her family treats her like a second-class citizen. Like, it's just like...
Some of my favorite characters in like any media are like the like schlemiels, you know, like your characters who are just like shat on for no reason.
Yes!
Just like get the short end of the stick all the time, even though they seem like perfectly nice people. And that's kind of Edith.
100% Edith. Yeah.
Like you always have this sense that, like from the rest of the family that they're like no one ever says it. There's always this sense of like, shut up, Edith. It's like the undertone of every line.
And like she's the middle child too. So I mean, this series had a lot to say about class dynamics, also family dynamics, your placement in the birth order, where that puts you in the eyes of your parents. And poor Edith, she tried so hard.
Well, also it's like they do have class versus family, but Edith even wins in the class battle because you're just rooting for Anna and Mr. Bates the whole time, and you're like, like, yeah, those are fucking solid people, but Edith's still garbage.
That's true.
Well, Emma will get on the board with that one. That question was from K.R. Swartzbeck. Thank you, K.R. Swartzbeck, for your Downton Abbey question. This will bring us to our first shiny question. Our first shiny question here. This is a game that we call Under Review. So I am going to read a real review of a piece of media, and it'll be up to you to see if you can identify what we're talking about based only on the review of it.
Please tell me these are like 5-star reviews on Amazon of 1-star pieces of media.
I should actually go to Amazon for some of these. No, but I do go to like sort of published critics in newspapers and TV shows stuff.
All right.
Great. Well, let's go ahead and put that review up there. This is from Jeff Brown of the Monthly Film Bulletin. The team's visual buffooneries and verbal rigmaroles, some good, some bad, but mostly indifferent, are piled on top of each other with no attention to Oh, I see Goots is buzzed in.
Actually, Monty Python's Flying Circus.
You are correct that it is Monty Python, but it is not Flying Circus.
Oh, and now for something completely different?
That is incorrect.
Actually, it's a review of Monty Python and the Holy Grail.
It is Holy Grail. This is Holy Grail. Yes.
Just took a stab.
Yeah, Goots gave you a bit of an assist there.
I know. I'll take it. I'll take the assist.
There were some clues here. Goots, if you had read a little bit farther, you would have seen the quote towards the bottom that no attention to judicious timing or structure, and a form which began as a jaunty assault on the well-made review sketch, and an ingenious misuse of television's fragmented style presentation threatens to become an unyielding and unfruitful as the conventions it originally attacked. So that would have tipped you off that we're not talking about a TV show here.
I was like thinking of like just British television shows, and I had some confirmation bias, and so I was going through the review going, this fits to the great British baking show, and I was like, okay, no attention.
The visual buffooneries of the Great British Bake Off can no longer be. It's very angry.
Because in a weird world, if a critic were going to like have something negative to say about it, you know, like some of this would be like total bizarre ire, but still might fit, you know?
Yeah. But can you imagine a film of Great British Bake Off?
You did version?
You did say film.
It's funny to be like reading this review because like I don't necessarily disagree with the points of the review, but I think that there are things that make it good. Like, they're sort of just like, it's kind of just like a bunch of sketches thrown together. It's like, yeah, cool. I love a good sketch.
Well, that's why I would have still gotten it wrong if I'd read the whole thing, because that was why I pitched and now for something completely different, which was Monty Python's first film, which was just them reshooting their TV sketches in a new format, which I feel like this review actually fits pretty well for that version of it.
Great. Well, that point will go to Emma, and we will move on to our next statement. In the first episode of Red Dwarf, technician Dave Lister is frozen in suspended animation aboard the mining vessel Red Dwarf when a radiation leak kills all other personnel aboard the ship. When he wakes up 3 million years later, his only companions are Holly, the ship's computer, a hologram of Dave's former roommate, Arnold Rimmer, and a cat-like alien simply named Cat. Goots is buzzed in.
Actually, he's not an alien. He's an evolved version of Lister's cat from 3 million years earlier. He's a descendant of that original cat, but he is not an alien. He is just a cat that is from a race of evolved cats.
That is correct. Not an alien cat. That is a cat that, over the course of 3 million years being frozen in a spaceship, slowly evolved into a very humanoid cat-like creature named Cat. Have you watched a lot of Red Dwarf, Goots?
All of it, yes.
I've actually never seen any, though I know like some people who are like big fans of it, and I was like reading through the premise, like this is a perfect premise for a TV show. Like this, I don't like one location, limited characters. Like if you really need to shoot on a budget but do like a fun sci-fi thing, it's like this is the way to do it.
I may have seen all of it, but to be fair, I haven't read all of the novels yet, so I can't really call myself a fan.
Is this like a Star Wars situation where there was like a whole bunch of novels and then somebody came in and they went, no, you know what, those novels are no longer canon. We're now referring to those as legends. And
kind of, in as much as the the first couple novels were co-written by the two writers who created the show and wrote for the show. But then one left the show, I think after season 3, but they decided to continue the novels with each writing different novels that split off into different universes. So there are actually two different versions of Red Dwarfs, depending on which creator you read.
Well, that point will go to Goots. We'll move on to our next question here. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle eventually wrote 4 novels and 56 short stories featuring Sherlock Holmes, so it's no surprise that he eventually got tired of Holmes and wanted to move on. In 1893, Doyle sought to end the Sherlock Holmes series with his story, The Final Problem, in which Holmes and Professor Moriarty plummet off the Reichenbach Falls. Fan outcry against the apparent death of Holmes was so severe that Doyle published The Hound of the Baskervilles 8 years later, in which it becomes apparent that Holmes faked his own death. Goots is buzzed in.
Actually, it's not revealed that he's back from the dead in Hound of the Baskervilles. That's simply a later novel.
That is correct. Though Doyle did publish The Hound of the Baskervilles after The Final Problem, the events of the Hound of the Baskervilles is set is something of a prequel. It's not a thing. He did eventually go on to publish The Adventure of the Empty House, in which Holmes does return, and there is this whole thing. But that is a separate book entirely, even though both were published after Holmes's apparent death. Yeah, I bring this up also just to talk about, like, fans have always been like
terrible.
Yeah, just like, give us what we want. And it's like, if you bother them enough, they'll do it.
It's a sense of entitlement. But you know what? Without that sense of entitlement, would we have gotten the fabulous fall 2020 anime series that is about a young, sexy Moriarty? I don't know, you know?
You don't know how things shake out, so you have to just roll with it. It feels like such a modern thing, which is why it's fun for me to imagine, like, Conan Doyle being...
Like, what did they do? Did they, like, write Sir Arthur? Because today you just, like, angry tweet at people. You just, like, get in their mentions. But did they all, like, send a letter, you know?
Yeah, like, it had to be, like, letters to editors.
Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's publisher?
Yeah, like, what is the, like, 18... Like,
They show up to talk to the queen, and they're like, no, I'm fine. I have plenty of money. My sheep are good. But...
You fucked up Holmes. We need more Holmes. Show me the clever man doing clever things. So that point will go to Goots, and that point will also go to every fan of Sherlock Holmes who finally got what they wanted and brought him back from the dead. Here is our next question. Philip Pullman's His Dark Materials series begins with the book titled The Northern Lights in the UK and The Golden Compass in the US. The story takes place in a parallel world which is populated by several sapient creatures, including humans, Panzerbjorn, Mulefa, and Bagashki. Humans are unique among these in that they are the only ones to have visible demon companions.
Actually, I don't know if you said witches, or I guess maybe the witches count as human, but witches also have demon companions.
Witches do have demon companions. I am counting them as human. I think they're still human, even if they're a little unworldly. I don't think this is a Lord of the Rings situation where they're like a whole other species.
Yeah, they're totally different.
We're Maya. We look and act like humans, but we're very different.
Actually, not all of the species that you named are sentient.
They are.
Okay.
Actually, one of those things you said is not on the same world. I think it's the Bugashki are actually those creatures with wheels instead of legs, and they're on even a separate plane from everything else.
I am tempted to just give it to you. You're very close. You said the wrong specific, but everything else is correct in there.
Okay.
So rather than just guess around forever, I'll go ahead and give you the point. The Mulefa are the ones you're describing. They are not in the Lyra's world. They're in a completely different parallel world, different universe. They are the ones with wheels. The Bagashti are not mentioned until the Secret Commonwealth, but they are described as being sapient creatures that exist within Lyra's world. The Saltzman's trying to correct me on something.
Well, so according to the wiki anyway, witches are distinct from humans biologically and culturally.
So I get 2 points.
Biologically.
I don't like the lesson of this. This feels othering. Oh, they're completely different. Well, I guess Amy gets the point one way or another. So that point will go to Amy. Wild, they're considered completely different.
Yeah, they live for way longer. I guess they can live up to 1,000 years.
They're sounding a little like wizards.
Yeah, they just
Lord
Maiar.
of the Rings.
That's interesting. I guess also it wasn't technically incorrect to not include them. But whatever, Amy gets the point one way or another.
Yeah.
We don't need to split hairs over this. I feel like that is an element of the books that isn't touched on all that often. Like the weirdness of like the demons gets a lot of attention of like, oh, what a crazy world. But also just like she's living in a world in which there are other like sentient creatures that are not human, and everyone's like, yeah, cool. Like, we don't need to talk about this that much.
The way that he does it, I mean, it again, it's like this weird brainstorming session where he's like, fucking witches, bears who can talk, guy from Texas, and you're just like, yeah.
What are the three weirdest things?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I've been meaning to ask you guys which of the words you're using refers to Sam Elliott, because that's all I remember from the Golden Compass.
Have any of you have you been reading the new books that he's been putting out?
I didn't know he was.
Sequels. I recommend checking them out.
Cool.
The Secret Commonwealth, which is the one I just mentioned, is where we get the first reference to the Bagashti, which I'm sure I'm mispronouncing, but just so you know, it's spelled Bagazhkti, and I don't think I can make my mouth make those sounds. Bagashti.
Nah, that's too many consonants.
I'm sure it's based on some some language where like the ZH is standing in for like a zh or something, but Bagashti. But yeah, they're described as being, they sound like they're kind of like the bears in that they're like sentient, but they're like camels. They're like small sentient camels that live in the mountains in a sort of.
How small are these camels? Like,
we haven't seen them in the book.
Cat size?
They've been referenced, like we know of their existence. Someone's been like, oh yeah, if you go into the mountains, these things exist, but we haven't actually seen one yet.
Because I'm now just picturing a very tiny
camel, like fits in your hand.
Yeah, like cell phone sized camel.
Well, that point will go to Amy. This will bring us to our next shiny question. So this is a game that we're calling Across the Pond. So a lot of American TV shows are actually adapted from British TV shows first. So in a moment, I'm going to show you 6 different American TV shows. All of them are based on English TV shows except for one. First person who can identify which one does not belong here will get the point. Goots is buzzed in.
Actually, I don't think Review is based on a British show.
That's correct, actually. Review is based on an Australian show, so it is based. It is based on a different TV show. The rest of these are all based on other shows. All in the Family is based on Till Death Do Us Part. Love Island and Cash Cab and Shameless are all of the same name. Sanford and Son is based on Steptoe and Son, and that of course leaves Review based on an Australian show of the same name.
Out of the pictures, though, Review looks the most English.
It really does. Like, that's the one where you feel like they didn't even try to hide the fact that they were ripping off another show.
That point will go to Goose. Has everyone seen all these shows? I guess I'm just curious.
No, I might in a waiting room have seen Cash Cab. But I think, and I've seen clips from a Review. I haven't seen a whole episode.
I used to actually watch Cash Cab quite a lot.
It is a very there's like a whole genre of TV that is sort of like comforting, extremely predictable, almost ignorable TV, and it definitely falls into that category of like if you're paying one brain cell's worth of attention to it, you're like, okay, I got it.
Yeah, but also I'm not gonna lie, I definitely fantasized about like being in New York and just accidentally ending up in the Cash Cab sometime, which is clearly not how it works. I know how reality TV works.
Emma, I hate to break it to you. Great. Well, we will move on to our next question. In the movie Hot Fuzz, Bill Bailey plays 2 different characters named Sergeant Turner. The Turners are a pair of identical twins who have the same uniform, work the same front desk job, and are even seen reading the same Ian M. Banks novel. You can distinguish the 2 by their different hairstyles. Goots has buzzed in.
Actually, they don't read the same novel.
That is correct. Can you be more specific? I think I'll give you the point one way or another, but can you be a little more specific there?
Only one of them is reading The Wasp Factory, and the other one is reading a different E.M.N. Banks novel that I can't remember the title of because I only know one title of E.M.N. Banks novels.
That's a good guess. I'm still going to give it to you because you're close enough. So what I was actually looking for here is that Ian M. Banks wrote books under the name Ian M. Banks and also under the name Ian Banks, I-A-I-N. Banks. In Hot Fuzz, one of the twins is seen reading an Ian M. Banks novel, and one is seen reading an Ian Banks novel.
Oh my God.
Which is, of course, very nitpicky, but it's also just a fun little like joke on like, it's like, oh, they're almost identical.
That's
There's
good.
just little things different about them, even to the point that like the things they're reading are just like very similar but slightly off. I don't necessarily expect you to know that, but I think it's a fun joke that's worth pointing out, talking about.
It's like me and my twin. Like the only thing that's different about us is I'm an actor in Los Angeles and she's a petroleum engineer in Texas who's married with kids. other
But
than
otherwise,
that,
so
Basically
similar.
the same life. I don't know how you tell the two.
Sometimes we switch places, and I'm like, uh-oh, oil. It's like Lucy at the chocolate factory. You're just shoving oil in your mouth. Cool. We will move on to our next statement here. T.H. White's The Once and Future King is a modern retelling of the King Arthur legend set in the 14th century instead of the 6th. The book collects and edits 3 of White's earlier Arthurian novels, The Sword and the Stone, The Queen of Air and Darkness, and The Ill-Made Knight, while adding 2 additional books, The Candle in the Wind and The Book of Merlin. Amy has buzzed in.
Actually, T.H. White didn't write all of those 3 that you said.
He did, actually, yeah.
Actually, the original Arthurian legends aren't necessarily set in the 6th century. They're kind of set whenever. There's no definite time of when they were actually written down.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little questionable. Like, it's not like, but I think it's generally agreed upon. Like, generally, like before The Once and Future King, it was like, okay, this is like 6th century. This is around the time in England that we're looking at.
I will accept that statement, but I would like to point out that the name of the show is not generally.
Well, the problem with Arthurian legend is like no one agrees about anything, you know? Like everyone has a different opinion and everything's like kind of mismatched and like there's different versions. So like finding a definitive answer for anything is like, I don't know. But I think most people will say like Arthurian legend generally is 6th century.
Actually, the Book of Merlin is not part of the Once and Future King.
That's correct, Emma. That is totally correct. The Book of Merlin was written to be part of the Once and Future King, but at the time of its publishing, it wasn't published for 2 reasons. One, there was a paper shortage because the war was going on. And also,
that old thing.
That old thing. And also, the Book of Merlin ends sort of the arc with a pretty strong like anti-war message. And it was like, maybe we shouldn't be doing this in the middle of the war. We should be getting people psyched up for war and supporting the thing. So the publishers removed the Book of Merlin and sort of like made Candle in the Wind the end of Once and Future King. Later, after T.H. White died, they found Book of Merlin in his stuff and they published it posthumously as being like, it's the lost book from Once and Future King. So it is available, just not originally part of the book.
Yeah, because I was going to say, I remember reading this book in high school and I was like, I don't remember any Book of Merlin in that old paperback I checked out from the school library.
Yes, so that point will go to you. It is very funny to be like, here's the King Arthur story. We're going to set it 800 years in the future.
It is. It's like, it's almost like a like science fiction retelling of the Morte d'Arthur.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think like part of the idea was like it becomes this sort of just like generalized like English mythology type story where it's like, okay, there's Robin Hood here and there's also Arthur, and the book plays with anachronisms through the whole thing, like, you know, Merlin knows about Hitler and stuff like that, you know, like, so like there already is this like weird playing with time going on.
It's honestly a little bit like a Renaissance fair. Like, I don't know if you've ever gone to a Renaissance fair where it's
Have
like
I been to a Renaissance
where it's like
fair?
Queen Elizabeth is reigning, but also Robin Hood is there. Like, that's Once a Future King.
Yes. A Renaissance fair is also like the perfect example of like American Anglophilia, of just this thing of like, it's like, we don't really care about the actual facts. We just sort of like the kind of cosplay element of this image of Britain that we have. I would love if there were, and if there is, someone please tell me if there's like an American version of like Renaissance fairs in,
Oh my God.
in the British Isles. Like if there's,
It's like Boston Tea Party Fair.
yeah, but it like mixes different eras of American history all up. It's like cowboys and Thomas Jefferson and just like,
Diabetes land.
Yeah.
well, I'm off for the gold rush. Cool. This will bring us to our last shiny question of the game. And this is a game called Needs More Pixels. So the way this works is, in just a moment, we're going to show you an iconic image from TV or film that we have pixelated just all to hell. It'll be up to you to see if you can identify what this image is. Tell me if you know what this is. If you all want to pass, we'll get one level clearer. If you think you have a guess, we will stay there.
I mean, I genuinely just see a bunch of purple squares. So.
That's obviously Benedict Cumberbatch, so
Clearly.
definitely pass.
Yeah, I'm
for
going
me.
to pass.
I'm gonna take a shot.
You're going to take a shot.
I'm
Goots
gonna
is
go
going
for
for
it.
it. All right.
I'm going to bet. Actually, is this the TARDIS?
This is not the TARDIS. I'm sorry, Goots.
Good guess. That was such
Very
a
good guess.
I had to take a swing.
You had to take a swing. Goots is out.
I loved it.
But I love just picking up on colors and being like, that's a TARDIS.
Could've been. It's purpley blue.
We'll go one level clearer here. Don't know if that helps anything.
Let's try to magic
It's
eye
just
this
more
mother.
square.
You can guess or you can pass.
I'm a pass.
I'm gonna pass.
Okay, next level.
Yeah, what the?
Oh my God. Oh, it just got worse. Yeah, I will pass.
I'll pass too.
All right, we're getting a little clearer.
Oh.
Actually, this is a weeping angel.
This is a weeping angel. Goots, you had the right property. It just wasn't the TARDIS. We'll go ahead. We'll skip. There we go.
Hey.
Also a Doug Jones character.
And luckily, everyone was staring at this pixelation the whole time, so you had nothing to worry about. I wouldn't have put you in that danger. Don't worry about it. That point will go to Emma.
Yeah, I just can't with Doctor Who. I
The trick is you got to start from the beginning and work your way, and it gets good around season 25. You have to go in order before it starts getting good.
Wait. But Goots, are you saying you need to start with like the OG like William Hartnell serials?
Yeah, you
Okay.
have to start with the
See,
audio recordings
this
of
is
the
the
lost
problem.
episodes.
This was another problem. Everyone had their version of where to begin.
The first Doctor Who I can remember watching are some of the Tom Baker serials, because my dad is from the UK. So he, it's so funny because in the US, Doctor Who is like nerd niche fandom television. In the UK, it's like just what's on Sunday nights. So it's like it's not this prestige television we're making it out to be.
Well, this will bring us to our last question, which, as always, concerns real-life skills. Here we go. Today, there are 100 pence in a pound, but that wasn't always the case. Prior to decimalization in 1971, there were 240 pence in a pound, 60 pence in a crown, and 24 pence in a florin. Smaller denominations of minted coin include the quarter pence farthing, the quarter farthing, and the mite, which was 1/24 of a pence. Oh, Amy, you've buzzed in.
Actually, a crown is worth more than a pound.
No, that is incorrect.
Actually, a crown was worth 40 pence?
That is incorrect. That is incorrect. Emma.
Actually, a mite is a made-up piece of currency.
Emma, you're wrong, but you're close enough that I think we'll get farther away if I just call it. So going to allow that. You're
Yes!
half right. A mite is a real piece of currency that did exist, but it was never a minted coin, which is what I said it was. It was purely an accounting piece of currency in Tudor times. So it was like, it's like when you go to the gas station and you can get like a tenth of a, like you charge a tenth of a cent. So you keep track of these 24ths of a pence. And then if enough added up, then you would round up. But until that, it was never a minted thing that actually existed, just a decimal. So we'll give that point to Emma, which will also clinch the win for you. That is 5 points for Emma, 1 for Amy, 4 for Goots. Thank you all so much for playing with me today. Thank you for watching. Join us next time for even more pedantic corrections right here on Jolly Old Actually.